Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you your hosts, Spencer and Laura Williams.
Hey everyone, I'm Laura.
I'm Spencer, and we're married with board games. Sometimes in life, you just need a good old-fashioned duel to settle a disagreement.
But instead of pistols, let's be a little more civil and use swords and giant hammers. What do you say?
I say we do that, but in board game form. That's my go-to answer for everything these days.
Today we are previewing the upcoming Bushido from Gray Fox Games. It's a 2 or 4 player dueling game that uses dice as the main mechanism.
Let's head over to the table to show you a little bit more. Alright, this is Bushido. Now, I only have one player mat out here on the table, but it does come with 2, as there wasn't the need to bring out the other one. The game takes place over the course of 3 rounds, essentially. In the first round, you'll be drafting technique cards with the other player. In the second round, you'll be choosing a weapon card and then deciding what guard you want to start the game in. And then the third round is essentially the duel. And then you will go through a turn order that you see here on this player mat, and that will be resolved. And then it will go back and forth between each player doing these steps until one player is left remaining. The goal is you start with 12 health. In this copy, they gave us D12s to keep track of our health, but I believe there's going to be a health tracker on the player mat. But yeah, you want to knock your opponent down all the way to 0. You'll start the game by drafting these technique cards. You'll see these technique cards, and they're going to be kind of shiny because of the card sleeves, but they have a title, they've got some artwork on them. Right here is going to show you the number of dice and the color of dice you're going to roll if you use that technique card. And then there's an ability down here that will inform you what you're going to do whenever you play this technique card. And there's also a class, if you will, that the technique card is up here in the corner. And it's important sometimes to take cards of similar classes because you can use them to boost another class of the same kind, which will essentially give you another dice of your choosing. You'll go through 5 rounds of drafting with each player taking turns picking first. And so you'll end up with 5 technique cards, and that's what you'll be using for the entirety of the game. Once you have your 5 technique cards, each player will then decide which weapon they want to use. Now there are 4 different weapons. You've got the katana. I don't even know how to pronounce these, but you can see, there are different weapons. Tell you how many tokens that you can actually be able to keep from round to round. So that's right here. There are different abilities based on what guard you're in, if you're in high guard, middle guard, or low guard. And so you may want to choose your weapon based on your strategy. If you plan to stay on high guard, where you're going to be attacking a lot, mid guard, which is kind of like a mix, and then low guard, where you're more in a defensive position. So once each player secretly chooses a weapon, you put it face down, and then one player will select their guard to start in, so it can be any of these. Then after the other player sees that, they can pick their guard, and then both players will reveal their weapons. Now again, this is the weapon that you're going to use for the entirety of the game. You don't get to change out your weapon. Once each player has a weapon and a guard, the first player to duel will select one of their technique cards. Let's say that I chose Strong Parry. I will place this down here, my technique. This will tell me how many red dice, or how many dice I'm going to roll for my technique. So I'm going to take 2 red. Then if I'm in the middle guard, I'll take 1 red die and 1 gray. And then looking at my ability, if I'm in middle guard, I may resolve gray blocking as a hit. But it doesn't give me any extra die. So on my turn, once I collect all my dice, I'll roll them, and I will resolve them. And you'll see there are 4 actually different symbols, and they're going to be different based on the roll, or based on the color of the dice. So red dice will be more attack oriented, gray will be in the mix in the middle, and then blue will be more defense oriented. This symbol means you deal a hit to your opponent. This symbol means you take what is essentially a shield token in your holding area. If you had the blue die, this is an evade. So if I had any hits up here, I could use this to lower a hit. And that's it. You'll roll. If you happen to have one of these Torii tokens, you can use that to re-roll some of your dice if you want to. But once you're satisfied with what you have, or if you can't re-roll, you resolve them. Any tokens you acquire, you don't immediately get to use those. Those go to your holding area, and then you'll deal your hits. Now your opponent will not immediately take that damage. They have their turn to resolve it. So in this example, if I had 3 already by my opponent, and I had rolled this symbol, if I had a blue die, I can use this to reduce this. Let's say I already had some of these shield tokens too. I can also spend one of those to lower that as well. So I have my turn to deal with the hits that my opponent previously dealt to me. If I still have some here at the end of my turn, that's when I'll take that amount of damage. So I would take 3 damage off of my die damage counter. And then my hits reset to 0 just in time for my opponent to do more damage to me. You can, on your turn, instead of playing a technique card, decide to change your guard. If you do, you take all technique cards you've previously played, because as you play them on top and cover up the current ability. If you change guard, you take up the cards you've previously played, you can change a guard, so say I go to high guard, and that's it. So really, for this turn, it's kind of a balancing thing where I don't get to use any abilities for my technique cards, but I do get to change my guard. I get to roll dice still, and I'll take a rage token. When you spend a rage token, you get to add a red die to your dice pool for whenever you're attacking. So there's a lot going on with the types of dice you're rolling, what guard you're in, which weapon you chose. I didn't even talk about the symbols. So with this weapon in middle guard, I talked about middle guard, but in high guard, I can resolve 1 red die miss as a hit. In low guard, I can resolve 1 evade as a hit. So there's lots to think about when you're drafting cards, when you're choosing the weapon, when you're choosing which guard to switch to, as far as how the cards all work together. At the end of your turn, any tokens you've acquired will go over here. Again, depending on what your weapon allows you to keep, you can't keep more than that. So here I'd be safe, I keep that shield token, but I can't keep more than 3. A recap on the turn order: technique or guard, so either play technique card or change your guard. You'll roll your dice, you'll resolve your dice, resolve your damage if you haven't been able to reduce any of your hits. You'll collect your holding area over here, and then you check for end of game. So if you've been reduced to 0, or if your opponent has, then somebody's won the game, and that's Bushido. Bushido.
Bushido.
So, Bushido. Let's talk about it.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so now this is a preview, so this is not a final prototype that we got to look at. But having said that, I think they're at a good point now with like the artwork. I like the design of everything.
I do.
Just the artwork of the weapons and the different cards.
Right. Well, and the different characters that are performing, you know, whatever move or.
Rock Slide, one of my favorite cards.
That's your favorite.
Yeah. No, but I think that they're. I don't know if I would change anything about the artwork itself. I think it's probably pretty close to final.
Well, and I feel like it evokes the right mood for the game.
Definitely. I also really like those player mats.
They're great.
I think that, you could easily possibly say, oh, these are just an extra. But I think the fact that this is, going to come with every copy of the game, it's really essential.
Well, and especially with the way the game flows,
Yeah.
I mean, with figuring out which guard you are, making sure that you keep any tokens that you earn over in the essentially like reserve until the next turn, and keeping track of the hits and how much damage they actually do.
Right.
The only other way I could think you could do it is by more cards, and those would get all mixed up and messy.
Yeah.
Why not have the nice mat?
Right. Well, it's great, and it's laid out nice. Everything is easy to follow. The iconography and everything on there is explained and laid out well. So, really like those player mats. So let's talk about the cards.
Okay.
The cards themselves. Me personally, I feel like they're all, as far as like the wording on them, most of them are pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. But I think for me there were just a few that it took, maybe a game or two to really understand how they worked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think for me, I just needed to really pay attention more to, I know with one of the weapons that I used, it says you could only use 1 die of a color that you rolled
Yeah.
for this thing, whereas most cards, it's any dice. Well, I mean, I can't say that. A lot of the cards that I've played with say whatever dice have this result. But you really have to pay attention to that quantity and how many you are allowed to use.
Well, and so for me, I don't know if it's just a matter of, really understanding how the game works before some of those things clicked. Because, especially our first play, there were some things that we just assumed that weren't correct. Like taking damage, we assumed that whenever I dealt damage to you, it was on your turn.
Right, we didn't pay attention down there in the bottom right side of the mat, the order that it goes in.
Yeah.
I like that mechanism of the game, that you don't actually take the damage on your 12-sided die.
Right.
Until after your turn, so you can mitigate some of that.
Yeah, well, let's get into that here in just a minute. Okay. But as far as let's finish up the thought on the cards. I think that they're it's not difficult though. Like once you get the hang of the game, all the iconography and the wording on the abilities does actually start to make sense. So you might have that little hiccup at first, but know that it will be clear to you as you play the game more.
I don't know that I agree with that so much as far as like understanding the text. I think my thing with the more plays was just becoming familiar with what cards go well together when it comes to the drafting.
Right.
The correct cards to go in your hand. Everything intertwines. If you're going to be the first one to duel or the first one choosing, that is a big determiner of how are you putting your guard, and then what cards are you wanting to take.
Right.
I think that's huge, and you're really only going to become familiar with what works the best through multiple plays.
Right. Exactly. So you hit on this a little bit about how everything is the flow of the game is pretty quick.
Yes.
You've got those essentially 3 rounds of the game, but those first 2 go really quick. You've got the draft is simple, right? You pick one, I pick one, we clear. Then I pick one, then you pick one, we clear. We do that 5 times. Very quick, very easy, and simple. Very easy to understand. Then you go to the weapon and guard selection. That's easy. You choose one of the 4 weapons that you have, you put it down, and then one person chooses the guard. So that's really easy. And then finally, when you get to your duel, you look and your duel has like 6 steps, I believe, but they all go through real quick. And I appreciate that for this type of game. Especially if you're beating up on somebody, you don't want it to go on for so long.
Right.
You can easily get through it and put them out of their misery.
I will say
and
though,
start again.
It can kind of take a long time. Like some techniques, depending upon what you rolled, you can pick up more dice and roll those too.
Yeah. And
then you can do some re-rolls using like the Tories and whatnot. And so it could take a little bit, but
it can.
I still think it's pretty quick anyway.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think there are some things in the game itself though that don't allow you to really like build up what you're doing, especially like when you're having to change your guard. You can only play, so like there's that balance of you can only play so many cards before you have to change your guard and go to a different. So you can't stay on high guard the entire game and just continually beating down your opponent. And I like that.
Nor would you want to, because unless you have a whole bunch of super high defense cards so that you're getting blue dice out there with all of the things to help mitigate that damage that we talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know that you wouldn't want to. I think it's crucial that you do not be afraid to change your guard
Definitely.
A few times.
Well, and so you talked about the damage being dealt. So you take those hits, and that's a distinction that you have to make in the game.
Yes.
Hits and damage.
Those are 2 different things.
But I think that's really neat.
I do too.
That when you get the hits, you go up on this track, and your damage increases exponentially, essentially.
It does.
But you're not dead yet.
No.
You have your turn to resolve some of those.
Right. So Spencer would play down a technique card and roll and deal his hits to me, and I would keep track of that on my board. Then I get to take my turn of playing my technique card and rolling my dice, and I can roll dice that can move it back. I can also have prior to that collected armor tokens that I can turn those in to take off a hit.
Right.
And then once I've resolved all of that, once you've resolved your dice, then you resolve your damage. So then if you still are on a numbered point, then you'll move down on that dice. And I really like that.
I do. I like that you have a chance to deal with the damage, with the hits that have been dealt to you.
Well, and it's really cool with the different techniques. That one of Spencer's favorite cards, like he talked about already, was Rock Slide. That with any hits that I move back using an armor token, I still take a damage for that. So 1 damage point, not a hit.
Right.
See, there's a difference there, because I think with like 3 hits, you take 6 damage, and then with 4 hits, you take 10 damage. It increases, not at the same rate as the hits, and so some of those things can be pretty tricky.
Yeah, well, and so going with that, you have to find the right combos.
Yes.
Of, like you mentioned earlier, the types of cards you draft. And because of that, that informs what guard you start with and
which
what weapon. Yeah. And so there's a lot to uncover here, and finding those awesome combos, I think, will be a joy to explore.
Right, and I think it's very helpful that they do suggest in the rules that you start out with a basic weapon first. That is most helpful, and it is a good weapon.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's really neat to be able to explore the different combos, and just in our plays, we've tried so many different things.
Yeah, there are some that we haven't even used yet, I think.
Right. Well, for sure. I think you'll be playing a lot of games, and talk about replayability with this game. I think that definitely, that factor is there.
Well, and it even leaves it open for expansions of getting new weapons and techniques, or tokens even, or well, I guess not, maybe due to dice, but who knows? There's so many opportunities with this game.
Right, and kind of going on with those opportunities, I think one of the things that's cool, it's not just rolling dice, it's not just figuring out the right combos, but you also do have to plan ahead, almost a couple of turns ahead, and you guys kind of anticipate what your opponent's going to do, because, your plans could be completely thwarted by the fact that you either have to change your guard, or your opponent, you think your opponent, if I know you're going to change your guard, that's going to completely change what I'm going to do.
Right.
Because I know you're not going to have a technique card to play.
Right. Or I know you've got that Rock Slide card in your hand, so I know that I need to save my card that is going to give me a lot of blue dice to roll, so that I'm not having to use my armor tokens to move my hits back, because when I do that, I'm taking damage. Instead, I need to be able to roll a lot of blue dice that just move it without him doing his extra attack or whatever it is. But you really do need to be paying attention to what's in your opponent's hand.
What they're doing, but also it kind of helps to know the way they think too, to get into their mind. And
yep, especially when Spencer goes, I know he's getting ready to play his favorite card.
Well, and that's the cool thing, like, about this versus something like, Magic or something. You start, basically by the first duel or two, that you go through, you almost know the 5 cards that your opponent has. And so it doesn't take long to learn the cards that they're playing with. You're never going to know exactly what order they come out in, but you can kind of try to guess, make an educated guess on what they're going to do.
Right.
And I really enjoy that. It's not just, who knows what card they're going to play. No, I kind of have an idea what you're going to play.
Well, and that's what makes me very curious to play a 4-player game.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, got some Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon action going on in there.
Never seen that movie, so I can't comment.
Okay.
But so what do you think about this as a couples game?
I think that as long as, I feel like it's not a super in-your-face competitive game. I think it's light enough that it shouldn't make anyone, hurt their feelings if you're that kind of couple, which there's nothing wrong with being that way, and there are couples that are that way of, we just really can't do competitive against each other, because if you feel that way, then you should probably avoid this.
Especially with it being head-to-head, and you can't direct especially if you're playing 2-player, you can't direct your attacks to anybody else, then if you can't take that head-to-head direct conflict, then this game is not for you.
But at the same time, I don't feel like it's a super, I just beat you in your face. I don't feel like it is that way. I feel like it's still just skill.
Yeah.
And I've grown a lot of respect for Spencer playing this game. I'm like, you are a skilled fighter.
The last game we played was so close. We had 1 point.
One point away.
Yeah. But bottom line for this game, after having said all of that, is that it's a quick, easy to learn dueling dice game that has many strategic decisions to explore.
Bushido contains many elements that we enjoy in games. Card drafting, dice rolling, really useful player mats.
And while we don't usually opt for head-to-head games, the smooth game flow and quick turns counteracted that for us. You're not spending a whole lot of time beating up on your opponent before the game is over and you can try again for revenge.
And with the strategic depth of choosing the right card combos along with your weapon and when to change guards, there really is a lot to play around with in Bushido. It's not just rolling dice and seeing what happens.
And so, having said all of that, we throw our full support behind Bushido and endorse it as a fantastic dueling game. Consider this one if you like going head-to-head with a friend, partner, or, hey, even your mom.
Thanks so much for watching this preview. You can check out our reviews of published games over on the Dice Tower and at our website, marriedwithbg.com.